Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post. I am Ghadi and this is our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates, stories and news from a region that I call my home, West Asia. Today our top story is about news that took the world by storm. After years, almost decades of rivalry, proxy warfare in more than 5 nations in the region, animosity and almost war. In the end, Iran and Saudi Arabia sat down and started talking to each other. This happened in China, though was initiated more than a year ago in Baghdad. What does this mean? What would it change for the region? This report tells you more.
Iran and Saudi Arabia have never been on the same page, historically speaking. In 2016, the two powerful nations cut off their ties formally over the execution of a Shia Saudi cleric by Riyadh. 7 years on and several rounds of talks later, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia came up with a surprise. They decided to be friends, but with a twist, that is, Beijing playing peacemaker between Tehran and Riyadh. Though the agreement raises key questions about the timing, the reasons behind the agreement and the implications for both countries. The two countries have been at ideological and military loggerheads since Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979. The invasion of Iraq by the US in 2003 did not help matters. The rivalry between predominantly Shia Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia has over the years spread into Syria, Iraq, Lebanon and Yemen. The most contentious issue between Riyadh and Tehran right now is Yemen, where the two powerhouses are locked in a proxy war. The agreement could herald the end of a blood-drenched phase in the country. Not only that, the agreement has potentially wide implications for the Iran nuclear deal as well. The deal also shows Saudi Arabia's resolve for pursuing a foreign policy independent of the West. While everything about this development is interesting, what stands out is China's growing influence in the oil-rich region, which means the possibility of the US getting sidelined. The fact that China was the driving force in the talks could be a headache for the US, an ally of Saudi Arabia for a long time. The US plans for Iran could suffer a major setback, given that it has almost isolated Iran from the West with sanctions and diplomacy. If there is a genuine warming of Saudi relations with Tehran, one outcome is likely to be Saudi investment inside Iran. Riyadh has considerable influence over Bahrain, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates and others. Iran's de-escalation of tensions with Saudi Arabia could likely be followed by active diplomacy with these states, much to the discomfort of the West. The deal has also led to concern among many in Israel who think of Iran as an arch-enemy. It is definitely bad news for Israel's PM, Benjamin Netanyahu, for whom establishing formal ties with Saudi Arabia was on top of the agenda, as it was with the UAE in the run-up to the Abraham Accord. So, that dream of Israel seems to have been dashed, at least for now. While the agreement is good news for the region, how the deal plays out and benefits the region will determine Iran's place in the emerging world order.
We have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, as usual, let's take a quick look at what's making the headlines across the region.
After the diplomatic breakthrough deal with Saudi Arabia, Iran's Security Council Secretary visited the UAE. Ali Shamkhani met Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the UAE National Security Advisor, during his visit. Israeli parliament pushes ahead with bill to clip the powers of the judiciary and enact laws that had been struck down, despite months of protests against it. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan suggests that Ankara could ratify Finland's application to join NATO separately from Sweden. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says he would welcome Russian proposals to set up new military bases and boost troop numbers in Syria. The Reserve Bank of India and the UAE Central Bank sign an agreement to step up cooperation in various areas, including central bank digital currencies.
As Ramadan approaches, people of Palestine are hoping for a peaceful holy month. But is it possible with the rising tensions and the almost daily deadly clashes with the Israelis? Our next report tells you.
Ramadan. It is the most holy time of the year, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. For Muslims across the world, this is the time to reflect, rejoice, and celebrate. But as millions look forward to the upcoming days of festivity, fear is gripping the West Bank. Past is testament that Ramadan has often meant fasting at home and clashes on the streets. The West Bank is home to about 3 million Palestinians. That means 85% of the region's households are Muslims. And religious events do not sit well with a region so polarized. Residents, activists and security forces are already preparing for tensions to worsen. 2022 saw some of the deadliest clashes between Palestinians and Israelis in the past few decades. And 2023 has not started on an optimistic note either. From Israel bombing Gaza to Palestinians killing settlers, the past 3 months have seen it all. Shops, schools and banks have been forced to close down. Normal life continues to be a myth for the people on either side of the wall. This decades-old animosity comes to the fore at almost every religious festivity. The Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is known to Jews as the most sacred site, and for Muslims, the third holiest site. This is from last year. Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem became a battleground. Palestinians and Israeli police clashed at the religious site. Close to 50 people had to be hospitalized. The compound had to be closed off. Scenes were similar a year prior to that as well. After the evening meal ritual, there was a face-off on the streets. The Ramadan night saw tensions simmering in the holy city of Jerusalem. Palestinians clashed with Israeli police amid a dispute over evening gatherings at Damascus Gate. Israeli police fired stun grenades and sprayed foul-smelling skunk water. The Palestinians remained undeterred. They discharged fireworks in return. A few weeks ago, Israeli and Palestinian officials pledged to reduce the escalating violence in West Bank and Jerusalem. There are talks of renewing security coordination between the two. But talks are too fragile to be trusted upon. Tensions spiral quickly in a region this volatile. Regional officials have warned that Ramadan this year too could become a flashpoint for new violence. Border police reserves are recruiting more security officers for the Ramadan holiday. And the main focus will remain on what many call the circle of violence, that is the outer area of the Al-Aqsa compound. If Israel is beefing up security, Palestinian group Hamas is warning the leaders in Tel Aviv to not change the status quo at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Some members have even threatened to change the area into an earthquake if the status quo is altered. The Israeli-Palestine conflict is one of the world's most enduring conflicts. Year on year, the tensions escalate and peace looks like a distant thought. On the face of it, it looks like a two-sided conflict. But the roots are much more entangled. In the three most contested regions in Israel, Gaza, East Jerusalem and West Bank, the lives look very different. This small West Asian country is staring at an uncertain future. It is basically impossible to predict what will happen to a land so complicated. So for the unfortunate people here, the only option viable is to live one day at a time. For now, the next day is Ramadan. As Palestinians break their fast with dates and milk, one eye will always be on the lookout for violence. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
In the middle of the economic crisis and still reeling from the deadly earthquake that killed more than 40,000 Turkish people, the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced that he will be holding elections on May 14th. Now our next report brings you more insights on that.
Şimdi hanımefendiler ve
Turkey is holding its parliamentary and presidential elections on the 14th of May. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made the announcement this week. Despite the devastating earthquake that killed some 50,000 people in Turkey and Syria last month. Erdogan has been in power for 20 years, but this time he is facing the biggest challenge to his rule because of a cost of living crisis and his government's sluggish response to the earthquake. Erdogan has acknowledged some shortcomings immediately after the disaster, but also blamed severe weather conditions and damaged roads. So, what is at stake for Erdogan and Turkey? Considered to be a gifted orator and strategic thinker, Erdogan has inarguably emerged as Turkey's most important leader in generations. Supporters revere him for unshackling religious restrictions in the state, overseeing ambitious infrastructure projects, and turning Turkey into a geopolitical powerhouse. But polls indicate there will be a tough battle between Erdogan and a six-party alliance led by opposition party leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Soaring inflation, troubled economy, crushing dissent, stifling media has given the opposition parties a chance to build momentum against Erdogan before the elections. The six-party alliance is composed of nationalists, Islamists and conservatives. But some of Kılıçdaroğlu's critics say he lacks the charm and popularity that Erdogan has. And yet his reputation as an ethical bureaucrat has helped him in elections. Under his leadership in 2019, the CHP defeated Erdogan's ruling AK party in Istanbul and other big cities. Opposition has made it clear that its goal is to restore democracy and to bring back parliament system, undoing Erdogan's consolidation of power since 2018.
We will govern Turkey through consultation and consensus. As the heads of the political parties forming the National Alliance, we have also agreed on the roadmap for the transition to a strengthened parliamentary system.
The question that arises then is, will Erdogan lose after all? A recent poll showed the Turkish opposition presidential candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was leading against Recep Tayyip Erdogan by more than 10 percentage points. The polls also showed the opposition bloc was leading the parliamentary race at least 6 points ahead of Erdogan's AK party and its allies. The elections will decide not just who leads Turkey, but also how it is governed, where its economy is headed, and what role it plays in the region. The upcoming elections will have consequences far beyond Turkey and the region, as the country is at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, close to the south of Ukraine, next to Russia and the European Union, to the north of Syria. So analysts believe it is an incredibly important country with a very sensitive location. The election's outcome will be keenly watched across the world, as observers seek to determine whether Erdogan, who is walking a difficult political tightrope over Russia's war against Ukraine, will push the country in a more traditionalist, religiously conservative direction, or whether a new leader will be able to reset damaged relations with the West. Bureau Report, WION The World is One.
Lebanon's 100,000 pounds banknote, it is the biggest banknote. Now, it is almost worth a little less than $1. How did it get that bad? Let's take a look.
Lebanon's financial crisis is getting worse. Earlier this week, the Lebanese pound sank to a historic low against the dollar, marking the latest somber milestone. In an economic meltdown that has plunged most of the population into poverty. 3/4 of Lebanon's population of over 6 million now live in poverty, with inflation soaring.
Where can we go now? They should come and take us now. They should kill us and throw us in the ocean because we can't handle it anymore.
The Lebanese pound, officially pegged at 15,000 to the dollar, was trading at 100,000 against the greenback on the black market. As the crisis hit countries, banks went back on strike. The new rate was posted on mobile apps on Tuesday. Exchange shops and businesses use rates off these apps, as authorities have failed to shut down the apps. There is a crackdown on a ring of suspected exchanges behind them. With trust in the pound declining, most grocery stores, restaurants and some businesses have started pricing their goods and services in dollars. This dollarization aims to ease inflation and stabilize the economy, but it also threatens to push more people into poverty and deepen the crisis.
The situation is really terrible. There are two classes in Lebanon. People are barely handling the situation.
Ramadan is coming now and we will be forced in what they call the month of good and blessings to beg. Today a piece of lettuce is 50,000 pounds and I'm retired and my pension is in Lebanese lira and I can't even pay my rent. What's my solution?
The pound has kept sinking since the meltdown began in 2019. It was triggered by decades of rampant corruption and mismanagement by the country's political and financial elite. Despite the gravity of the crisis, the political elite has failed to take action. Since last year, the country has had no president, only a caretaker government, amid persistent deadlock between rival factions.
Whether or not the lira can be salvaged depends on the political context, and the current political context of policy inaction, where there doesn't seem to be any intention to do anything to tackle the crisis. As long as this status quo persists, I do not see a serious likelihood, or any likelihood for that matter, that the lira will be salvaged. So as long as this current status quo persists, all what we could see is continuous dollarization at an accelerated pace.
Then there are Lebanese banks, which have imposed draconian withdrawal restrictions, essentially locking depositors out of their life savings. The banks were closed again this week after they resumed an open-ended strike. The worker action began early last month in a protest against what the Association of Banks in Lebanon described as arbitrary judicial measures against lenders. This after depositors filed lawsuits to retrieve their savings. Limits to cash withdrawal has also added to the public outrage. The Lebanese people are running out of patience, as some have even resorted to armed hold-ups in a bid to lay hands on their own money. The facades of many banks in the capital are almost unrecognizable from the outside. They are covered in protective metal panels, while ATMs have been left vandalized. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
And now ending the show on a heart-stopping moment. Dubai. History has been made when a Polish pilot landed his plane on the helipad of Burj Al Khalifa hotel. It is the most iconic luxury hotel in Dubai. Take a look.
To be honest, I couldn't feel happier. 2 years in the making, third attempt, and we've managed to put a plane on a helipad 200 meters above the ground on the most iconic, the most beautiful building in the world, which is absolutely fantastic, So, yeah, I couldn't be happier. We started to make a history.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you always the most recent updates, news and stories from the most volatile region in the world. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, coming to you from the middle of Beirut, Lebanon, and you're watching WION World is One.